In 1990, a little girl vanished from a rural farmhouse, ... But no report was ever filed. No investigation, no funeral. Just silence. 30 years later, her cousin inherits the house only to find a journal buried beneath the floorboards, a mirror that doesn't reflect quite right, and a name she was never meant to have. What happened in that house didn't stay buried. It's waiting for you to find it. Hit that subscribe button and stay with us, because this is where the story starts to breathe. This is a journey you won't want to take alone. Cora Ellison arrived at the farmhouse just before dusk, her old car kicking up a cloud of dust that hung in the air like a ghost. The last of the sun cast long skeletal shadows from the trees across the fields, making the house appear to be hunkering down at the end of the long gravel road. It was a tired-looking place, 2 stories of faded white wood and green shutters that hadn't closed properly in decades. The chimney was crumbling, and ivy clung to the porch like a desperate hand, unwilling to let go. Stepping out of the car, the gravel crunched loudly under her boots, a sharp, intrusive sound in the overwhelming silence. She just stood and stared, a mix of wonder and apprehension swirling in her chest. This was the place her grandmother had called home, yet had never allowed anyone to visit. The legal paperwork called it a modest rural property. The locals in town called it the haunted place by Ash Creek. Cora, she just called it hers now. She slung her bag over her shoulder and stepped onto the porch. The boards groaned beneath her, a weary sigh of old age. The front door didn't open easily. She had to lean her shoulder into it and shove. Inside, the air was heavy and stale, thick with the scent of dust, dry wood, and something faintly sweet and rotting, like old apples left too long in a forgotten bowl. Everything was still, as if time itself had stopped the moment her grandmother had passed, refusing to move on. A clock on the wall ticked, but the hands were frozen. A quilt was folded neatly over the back of an armchair, and family photos on the mantel were turned face down, their secrets hidden from view. Cora stood there for a long moment in the oppressive silence before whispering to no one at all. A quiet, almost sad word. Home. Her exploration began slowly. The house protested her every step with a new creak and groan. The kitchen was surprisingly clean, but had an unused quality to it. The pantry still held canned goods with labels so faded they were almost blank. She went upstairs, and the air grew colder. There were 2 bedrooms. One was clearly her grandmother's, filled with heavy, dark wood furniture. The other was locked. A shiver ran down her spine as she tried the doorknob. It was cold to the touch and locked tight. In the hallway, a long, crooked mirror was covered in a thin layer of grime. She wiped it with her sleeve, and for a fleeting second, her reflection wavered, making her heart itch. She told herself it was just a trick of the light, but she avoided looking into it again. She tried to sleep that night on the downstairs sofa, wrapped in an old quilt. She was lulled by the distant chirps of crickets and the settling creaks of the house. But sometime after midnight, she was jolted awake. She didn't know why at first. Then she heard it again, a slow, dragging sound, like someone or something crawling just beneath the floorboards. She sat up, holding her breath, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. The sound came again, faint, muffled, but real. Then silence. She waited, listening to the pounding of her own heartbeat. Nothing more came. After a while, she lay back down, staring at the ceiling, but sleep didn't return. She now knew a profound truth. She was not alone. The next morning, driven by a desperate need for reality, Cora walked into town. She needed groceries and maybe a locksmith, a professional to dismiss the strange sounds and locked rooms. The local general store was more of a curiosity shop than a supermarket. The woman at the counter, with sharp, knowing eyes, gave her a thorough once-over. "You're the Ellison girl," she said, her voice dry. Cora nodded, feeling a little exposed. Haven't had a soul in that house since your grandma passed. Not that she welcomed anyone before that. Cora cautiously replied that her grandmother hadn't talked much about it. The woman leaned in. She didn't sell it. Didn't rent it. Just stayed there alone, she said, a long pause stretching between them. Some say she kept it sealed for a reason. A flicker of fear and excitement ran through Cora. What reason? The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. Sometimes walls remember things better than people do. That afternoon, back at the house, a powerful, almost magnetic curiosity led her to explore the back hallway, a narrow path to the laundry area. She stepped on a section of floor that sank slightly. Frowning, she knelt down. The floorboards here were different newer, poorly nailed down. They creaked unnaturally. With a butter knife, she pried one loose, revealing a hollow, dark, and cold space. A trapdoor was down there. Her heart lurched. She fetched a flashlight, its beam flickering, and discovered rusted hinges and a makeshift latch. It took all her strength to get it open, as if someone hadn't just closed it, but had tried to seal it shut. A gust of musty, cold air rushed out, smelling of damp earth and something else she couldn't place. The space was small, a crawl space, and her flashlight's beam revealed a small, broken doll, a child's slipper, and a leather-bound journal. As she picked it up, her hands trembling, she saw the childish handwriting on the front. Leia's book. Don't read aloud. That night, sleep was impossible. Cora sat by the fireplace, the journal in her lap. She opened to the first page, her heart pounding with every word. They put me down here again because I didn't say sorry. I don't like the dark. It has teeth. I hear breathing sometimes, but it isn't mine. Cora swallowed hard, her throat tight. The handwriting was shaky and uneven. I think someone else is down here now, she read on a later page. But they don't talk. They just whisper and laugh when I sleep. She looked up from the page. The house was silent. But from the hallway, deep below the floor, she heard it again. That slow, dragging sound. The house wasn't just a house of whispers and secrets. It was a house that was alive, and it wanted her to listen. That night, sleep was impossible. Cora sat by the fireplace, the journal in her lap, her heart pounding with a mix of dread and a desperate need to understand. She carefully opened it to the first page. The handwriting was shaky, a child's uncertain scrawl. She read, her voice a low, horrified whisper. They put me down here again because I didn't say sorry. I don't like the dark. It has teeth. I hear breathing sometimes, but it isn't mine. The words were simple, but they carried a weight of unimaginable loneliness. Cora swallowed hard, her throat tight with a sudden surge of empathy. She turned the page, and the entries became more frantic. Grandmother says this is punishment, but I didn't do anything wrong. I think she forgets who I am. Or maybe she doesn't want to remember. Then, a truly terrifying entry. I think someone else is down here now, but they don't talk. They just whisper and laugh when I sleep. As she read this last line, she looked up from the page. The house was silent. But from the hallway, deep below the floor, she heard it again. That slow, dragging sound. She didn't move at first, staying perfectly still on the sofa, her flashlight flickering in her hand. The sound came again, a soft scraping, like someone shifting their weight on hands and knees beneath her feet. No animal made a noise like that. No wind could echo that rhythm. It had come from the crawl space. She closed the journal slowly, stood, and with a cold, tight tread, she walked to the back hallway. The trapdoor was slightly ajar. She had left it sealed. Her flashlight's beam cut through the dust, revealing small, bare footprints pressed into the dirt. They led from the far corner toward the edge of the space, and then stopped right beneath where she had been sitting. Her scalp pricked with terror. She pulled the hatch fully open, and as she dropped the light into the dark, she saw something new. A drawing sketched in crayon on a scrap of bedding. It showed 3 stick figures. One was crossed out with a thick red X. Below it, written in a child's uncertain hand, was a simple and chilling label. Me. Grandmother. The bad one. Back in the kitchen, a new message on the hallway wall, written in shaky, childish letters, seemed to stare at her. You found me, now find yourself. This wasn't a warning. It was a challenge. Driven by a desperate need for answers, Cora drove into town. She stopped at the public library, a quiet, dusty place. The librarian, an older woman with tired eyes, stiffened when Cora mentioned the Ellison Farmhouse. There was a missing child case a long time ago, the librarian said slowly, but it was never filed officially. Just rumors. Your grandmother always said she never had kids. Cora's heart sank. She went to the newspaper archives and found no missing person report for Elia Grace. But she did find a small obituary for her grandmother's sister, Carolyn Ellison, from August 1990. The cause of death was listed as complications following a nervous breakdown after the loss of her daughter. A daughter who was never named. Her stomach twisted. Her family had buried more than secrets. They had buried a life. Back at the house, Cora returned to the journal. She found a new voice, a different handwriting, dated 3 years after Leia's last entry. It spoke of finding the journal and hearing the scratching, and it warned, the voice in the mirror isn't a voice. It's a memory that forgot how to fade. If anyone reads this, get out of the house. Don't look for her. She doesn't want saving. She wants remembering. Cora's hands shook. How many children had lived here? Who was this second voice? She walked past the hallway mirror, the one she had avoided. It was fogged with moisture. A single letter appeared in the condensation. C. Then, her name formed letter by letter. Cora. Below it, in a messy script, a chilling message finished itself. You were me. I was her. The haunting had become deeply personal. Cora now understood. The house wasn't just haunted by a ghost. It was inhabited by a shared, fractured memory, and the girl in the mirror wanted something back. Cora's hands trembled as she found the key, taped to the underside of a bookshelf in her grandmother's room. It was a small iron skeleton key, cold and heavy with the weight of its purpose. She knew exactly what it opened. The locked upstairs room. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she slid the key into the lock and turned it. It clicked, and the door opened an inch on its own. The air inside was still and heavy, thick with the scent of dust. The room was a child's, or had been. A small bed sat against the wall, a toy chest, a rocking horse, dolls. Everything was untouched, perfectly preserved. But the walls were covered in drawings, faces without eyes, trees without leaves, a girl with her back turned. Then, on the far wall, etched deep into the wood in sharp scratches, was a single chilling word. Coraline. Cora's knees buckled. That was her full name. No one had called her that since she was a child. Her grandmother always insisted she go by Cora. Etched below was a final, horrifying sentence. She gave me your name so I wouldn't remember mine. Shaking, Cora ran from the room and stumbled downstairs, her mind a frantic storm of questions. She found her birth certificate in her bag and stared at the name on it. Coraline Ellison, born 1993. It didn't make sense. Her grandmother's photo holding a newborn was dated 1990, 3 years too early. Unless... The truth was beginning to form a terrifying picture in her mind. Later that day, she returned to the upstairs room, and something else had appeared just below the name on the wall. A new line, carved in the same hand. She took my name so I couldn't scream. The scratches were fresh, clean, as if they hadn't aged at all. The truth hung heavy in the air. Someone had remembered, and it wasn't just her. Driven by a strange and powerful certainty, she opened the toy chest and found old cassette tapes. One was labeled simply C1. She pressed play. The tape hissed, then a small, shaky child's voice began to speak. It was her voice, but younger, much younger. "My name is Coraline. I live in the upstairs room now. Grandmother says I'm lucky, that I was chosen, but I miss being me." The voice continued, talking about a girl in the mirror who watched her while she slept. The tape ended with a plea. "If you find this, please help me remember. I think if I can remember, she can't hold me anymore. I think I wasn't supposed to live." Hearing her own voice speak words she had never said, calm, pleading, answering something unseen, shook her to her core. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt inhabited. Guided by a force she couldn't understand, Cora walked past the garden and the barn, toward a slight dip in the ground at the edge of the trees. Her hands moved with a certainty she didn't possess as she began to dig. It didn't take long for the shovel to hit wood. She unearthed a small, crude box, not a coffin, just something meant to hide a secret. Inside, she found tiny, brittle bones and a cracked mirror with a chilling inscription. Coraline equals Leia. She staggered back and fell to her knees. From the trees came a whisper that sliced through the air. "Now do you see?" It was all beginning to make sense now. There had never been two girls, just one. Born wrong, named wrong, and labeled dead. But she had lived and been split by grief and secrecy. Her grandmother had buried the truth, giving the child a new name and a new life. But the old name had stayed behind, trapped in the mirror, in the dirt, in the bones. That night, she sat before the grave mirror, the one with her name carved into its back. She placed it in her lap, along with the journal, the birth certificate, and the photo. It was a life torn in half. "I am Leia Annette Grace," she said softly. "I am Coraline Ellison." The reflection in the mirror smiled. A tear slid down its cheek, and then the mirror shattered in her hands. Not violently, but gently, like a chain slipping loose. The house exhaled. Somewhere beneath the floorboards, she heard a child laughing for the first time. The silence that followed was not the thick, oppressive silence of the past, but something different, lighter, still haunted, but no longer angry. The shattered mirror lay in pieces, each fragment catching the sunlight like a tiny star, a symbol of a life that was finally free. The morning after the mirror shattered was a new kind of quiet. Not the thick, stifling silence that had smothered breath and thought since Cora's arrival, but something different, a gentle, peaceful hush. The haunting had ended. The tension that had held the old house in a suffocating grip was gone, replaced by a sense of calm. The floorboards no longer groaned with every step, and the mirror that had tormented her since the beginning now reflected her plainly, without the flicker or the shadow of another child. Yet, even with the calm, Cora couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was still waiting, not for vengeance, but for a final choice to be made. She walked through the house in the early morning, going from room to room. She touched the walls, the windows, and the scars in the floorboards that marked generations of lives lived and forgotten. She saw the names carved into the door frames, the toy rabbit with its missing eye, and the cracked Bible. All of it was a fragment of a life that wasn't quite hers, but wasn't not hers either. She had been Leia once, and Coraline too. She had lived as both, remembered pieces of both, and that meant she could finally decide what came next. But first, there was one last place to visit. She opened the trapdoor to the crawl space for the final time. This time, the air didn't feel hostile. It felt expectant. Cora climbed down, flashlight in hand, though she barely needed it now. The darkness no longer seemed absolute, and shadows receded from her steps. In the far wall, the same gap where she'd found the first journal now gaped slightly wider. Something glinted inside. She reached in and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth, a locket. Inside were two tiny photos, one of her, Coraline, as a child, and the other, a grainy older picture of a little girl with braids and wide eyes, Leia. Two sides of one chain. And beneath the hinge, etched in small lettering, were the words, "Let her be whole." Back upstairs, the mirror fogged once more, but only a trace, like the faint breath of a child on glass. A message appeared, not in frantic scrawl, but in a clear, decisive hand. "You can go." Then a pause, and beneath it, "Or I can." The mirror stilled. Cora touched the glass, which was warm like skin again. She closed her eyes and spoke barely above a whisper, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'll stay." The mirror flickered once, then cleared. Her reflection smiled, but it wasn't hers anymore. It was Leia's. And for the first time, that girl stepped backward in the glass, turned, and walked away, not into shadow, but into light. That evening, Cora packed her things, not in a rush to escape, but with a sense of purpose. She wasn't running. She was ready. The journal stayed behind. So did the mirror, the locket, and the house itself. But the memory she carried with her was no longer a curse. It was a story, a life not forgotten, a truth no longer buried. She locked the front door behind her and turned toward the road. The wind blew gently through the branches overhead, a soft sigh of relief. And from deep within the trees, she heard a child's voice, clear, bright, and free. "Thank you." Cora smiled, a tear sliding down her cheek, and walked away into the fading sunlight, leaving the house on Broken Elm Street finally, truly silent. This story ends with a quiet victory, but the scariest stories are the ones that don't stay in the past. They're the ones that linger in your thoughts, making you wonder about the secrets hidden in old houses, about the whispers you might have heard when you were a child, about the forgotten truths buried beneath the surface. Cora faced her fears and walked away from a silence that had been waiting for her for decades. She chose to be whole, to accept her past and the pain that came with it. Her journey of unraveling a family secret has a powerful message. Some things need to be remembered so that they can finally be laid to rest. This is the kind of story that reminds us of the power of a name, the weight of a secret, and the courage it takes to confront a past that doesn't want to be found. It is a story about a girl who became a ghost and a woman who had to become a detective to save herself. The house on Broken Elm Street finally has peace, but what about the next secret waiting to be discovered? What about the whispers you've never quite been able to explain? If this story made your heart race, if it made you hold your breath, and if it made you feel the chill of a memory that was never your own, then you're a part of this journey now. Don't let the whispers fade away. Hit that subscribe button and become part of our community. Join us as we continue to shine a light on the stories that live in the shadows. Your support helps us bring these haunting tales to life, so you'll never have to feel alone in the dark. Come with us, and let's keep listening.